Thanks, Pepe. Hey, so I know Pepe already made an introduction, but hi, my name is Jason Park. I'm the VP of Operations, Concept Art House. We're a world-class art service company, and also we recently have a new China publishing division, Spellgun. And my talk today is about the changing dynamics of the Chinese mobile market. And I'm going to talk about how different the Chinese mobile market is from what we're used to in the rest of the world, as well as some of the pitfalls that developers need to be aware of before before jumping in. All right. So China's big. We all know that. We've known that for a while. But how big is it really? So this year alone, in just Q1, the mobile market surpassed $630 million. And at this rate, they're looking to surpass $3 billion by the end of the year, which is a 175% increase from the previous year. And in addition, since the market's just starting, analysts expect that in the next 3 years, the market would potentially quadruple. So it's really big, essentially. Shifting over to what kind of games generate the most revenue. So we see card battle games, turn-based RPGs, full-fledged MMORPGs, this is all on mobile, as well as a game type called SLGs, which are strategy RPGs that have like a grid-based battle system, similar to Hero Academy or chess. So coincidentally, these genres that have the highest revenue are also the highest monetizing, with ARPPUs surpassing $50, and that's average revenue per paying user. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you see casual and like tower defense games, and their monetization is their ARPPUs are only around $1 to $3, which seems fairly low, but their volume is just enormous. And take note that in other parts of the world, a lot of these casual and tower defense games are usually premium titles, so they've been converted to free-to-play, which may be some of the reasons why they don't have such high monetizing mechanics just yet. Okay. Next, I want to talk a little bit about the channels. So we know that when you develop a game here, your primary focus usually is iOS. You go iOS first, then maybe Google Play a little later. China, on the other hand, is a little different. iOS only amounts to 30% of the revenue in China, and 10% of that are jailbroken app stores. So it's not as big as you kind of would have expected. And Android's really where it gets a little crazy and very different. So in China, Google works in China. It's very limited, but Google services are banned. So that means Google Play doesn't work in China, and it's almost non-existent. There's little ways you can get Google Play on your devices, but it's pretty much non-existent. So in return, there's a lot of other channels that take the place of what Google Play does here and in the rest of the world. Some of the 50% of the Android market consists of the top channels, such as like Tencent, 360, Baidu, UC, and the other 50% consists of carriers such as China Mobile, China Telecom, China Unicom, the equivalent of AT&T, Verizon here, as well as 200 additional app stores, which range from gaming portals, media companies, hardware companies, as well as like antivirus providers that have all been able to amass a good amount of users across the past few years. So while you're familiar with the traditional 30% fee that you usually pay for iOS as well as Google Play or Amazon, China's a little different in terms of payment reductions. Initially, from your gross sales, there's 5 to 10% is deducted automatically from bad debt. So that includes fees from chargebacks, fraud, and just fraudulent activities and those kind of fees. So straight off the bat, you need to expect that 10% up to 10% of your gross sales are going to be deducted. The carriers, they actually help you out a little bit by creating caps on this value. For example, China Mobile, they cap the bad debt fee at 10%. China Telecom, they cap it at 15%, and China Unicom, they cap it at 30%. So I guess they really help you out a lot. Then for each payment method, there's a transaction fee, which ranges depending on the payment method. Carrier SMS payments is by far the most common form of payment, and most payments go through just through SMS payments, and the carriers all charge a flat 30%. So that's 30% of your gross sales that go just from transaction fees. There's additional other payment methods. A lot of the traditional game companies in China, such as like Perfect World, Shanda, NetEase, and QQ, they have their own payment methods as well, and they usually range around 25%. But ultimately, that kind of leaves you at 63% of your gross sales that you'll have. So as if that's not enough, each channel takes a hefty percent of the revenue of the net revenue on top of that. Many charge, I think 30% is a good average, and that's how a lot of the channels charge. But each channel deduction it's a specific rev share deal that you make specifically with that channel. So it all depends on how they're going to promote your game. If the channel has a lot of heavy muscles and a lot of users and are really able to bring a lot of users to your game, they are actually going to increase this value to a higher than 30%. So it's interesting where the more beneficial channels that really can provide you a lot of the users, they'll charge you a much higher rev share. Yeah. So just sticking with the averages that I have here, we're looking at netting 44% of your gross sales. So this is something that if you're publishing in China on Android, this is something you need to just expect. It's going to happen. I don't think there's any way around these deductions at least. Okay. Next, I want to highlight some of the key challenges of the market in my next few slides. First and foremost is piracy and copyright. If your game's already out in the US, on iOS, and especially if it's on Google Play and it's doing pretty well, there's a good chance your game's already out in China without you even knowing. And I'm not just talking about a copycat. I'm talking about your actual game. With all the bugs, with the exact artwork, it's there, and people are making money out of your game. So in order to battle this, you have to individually talk to each of the channels and get them to try to remove the pirated games. And you can't just submitting like a customer service ticket usually won't do the trick. You have to make your case to prove that you are the actual IP owner and the IP holder, and that you're going to continue to provide additional content for the game while the rest of the fake pirated copies probably won't. And then that way you'll encourage them to actually remove the pirated versions of your game. Here you could see there's 8 different versions of Fruit Ninja here, all with the name Fruit and Ninja in the title, all pretending like they're the real version when I'm not sure which one actually is the real one. I don't even know which one is the real version, essentially. So, but yeah, they really try. It gets pretty crazy, and you really have to battle that through the channels. And something new is there's a company called Kwayong, which has a web portal, which they pretty much have. They have pirated games that you can download on your PC, and in return, in addition to the pirated game on your PC, they have a PC app that syncs directly with your mobile device. So that way, players can get a pirated game on their mobile device using their sync without even jailbreaking their phone. So they're getting really creative on the piracy side in China. So another challenge is payment integrations. There's a lot of channels out there, and there's up to 20 major payment methods that you need to integrate with. So as a developer myself, I know how much we all hate SDK integrations, but there's a lot that need to be done. One situation that happened was, according to one of the large channels, One Doja, when Clash of Clans first launched in China, they got over 200,000 users in the first month, but they didn't make any money at all. Pretty much what happened was when a user tries to purchase gems in Clash of Clans, it would try to force the user to open up the Google Play Store, which wasn't allowed in China at that time, and essentially they made no money during that first month until they resolved it, of course, eventually. So in order to prevent issues like that, you really just need to integrate directly with either carrier billing, individual payment methods, and a lot of times the channels have their own specific payment SDKs as well too. All right, next, this goes without saying, localization. You can't just simply translate your game in simplified Chinese and think that you can succeed in the Chinese market. You need to truly culturalize your game and really just make it fit within the market. Chinese players, they they prefer playing games that they're used to and that they're really familiar with. There's a reason why there's so many Three Kingdom games that are doing really well. It's the story that they're familiar with and they all love, and it works really well. And a lot of the culturalization includes artwork as well as game custom content that's specific for China. As on the art studio side of our business, we get a lot of reskins that specifically targeting China. So it's something that just is really common, and it works for the Chinese market. So Plants vs. Zombies 2 is a game that we launched in conjunction with PopCap. And for this game specifically, there was a lot of adjustments that was made. As you could see on the icon itself, that was the bottom left was the official icon of Plants vs. Zombies 2, which looks like a Chinese zombie. And in addition to just the artwork, there was a lot of level progression adjustments just to incentivize players to replay the same levels over and over, as well as we provided better rewards for some of the more difficult levels and missions in PvZ. In addition, a hard currency diamonds was introduced in the Chinese version, and the biggest impact was that PopCap as well as TalkWeb, which was our publisher, they released a Kung Fu World update, which was probably by far the biggest impact that really made the game so successful. To this day, even though this Kung Fu World stage is farther in the game progression, it's the most frequently played stage outside of the initial Egypt stage if you've played PvZ 2. So we're all familiar with fragmentation. We have that problem here. So as a developer, how I got around fragmentation was I just target the top 15 phones and I forget about the rest, since really there's just too many phones and some of them are just dying out, so you just don't care about them. In China, unfortunately, the top 15 phones only amount to 20% of the market, so it's a much bigger problem. And to make matters a little worse and a little more difficult, the technical benchmark only gets lower. So that means if your game, it really pushes the envelope on like an older phone, like an iPhone 4S or a Samsung Galaxy S3, you may have a lot of trouble in China, such as a lot of out-of-memory errors or crashes, and just a lot of technical issues. A lot of the older phones in China also, they don't even have Wi-Fi on the phones, and so they're stuck with just extremely slow and throttled data plans. And so you really need to keep your game under 100 megs to get the majority of the market, and preferably even under 50 megs for file size, for your binary size. There you go. So distribution is obviously one of the biggest challenges you can possibly face. It's the biggest challenge we have here in America. How do you get your games out without paying so much for it? So if you remember that 30% deduction that I was talking about a few slides before that the channels take, you're probably wondering why they take so much of a rev share. Well, here's your answer. The most effective way of distribution is to get the channels to support your game. This is similar to Apple featuring your game, except each channel has the control to essentially feature your game. The difference between how Apple and Google do it here is in China, if they feature your game and your game isn't making much revenue or isn't able to retain high retention or monetization, they'll remove your game. So your game needs to be making a lot of money for them to be making money, for them to continue to feature your game. Otherwise, they will just take it out. They won't remove your game, but they just will remove the feature completely. There's a few things you can do to get your game supported by the channels. They really love special treatment, essentially, where you can offer like a 2-month exclusive just for that specific channel. And another method is you can just create like a customized build for that channel specifically that has like exclusive events or exclusive just features. But although that's pretty difficult due to just creating custom builds for each individual channel, and it's already hard enough to do that just in the US with Google Play and iOS. Channels also tend to follow the market. So a tactic that I've heard that a lot of companies do is they boost up their iOS App Store rating just to get featured on the Android channels before it kind of drops down, and at least they're featured for at least a few days. Yeah. Another method of distribution are co-promotions, where developers are willing to give yet another rev share to continue to promote your game. Some of the more common methods is getting celebrity endorsements, similar to what Glue did with Kim Kardashian. We all saw how well that paid off. It seems to be doing really well, and that's very common in China as well too. Offline promotion is also pretty big as well, where you can work with TV shows, TV sitcoms to get them to talk about your game, as well as there's a lot of celebrity concerts in China, and you can get the MC of the concert as well as the celebrity to just name drop your game. So there's a lot of these. Just co-promotion methods, and you just really have to be creative. One thing we did for Plants vs. Zombies 2 was we created actually a children's series with illustrated storybooks, and that worked well to get the younger market. For one of our upcoming games that we recently announced, a method that we went with was we went with a co-promotion method where we had a close relationship with the channels. So we were able to have them review the game early on and just get their feedback during the localization process. And we originally actually didn't receive the best feedback. They were a little conservative due to it being a Western game that we were bringing over to China. So what we did was we worked closely with a major TV network and got one of their main characters from one of the popular TV shows branded onto the game. So we went the IP angle. And as soon as the channels found out that this IP was associated to the game, they were all very interested and were willing to feature the game. So you can potentially use your co-promotion to get the channel support as well too. Media buying is also a pretty common distribution method. It doesn't have as much strength as it does here, where it's pretty much all about media buying. But although it is picking up in China. One thing you can do is you can actually buy ads from the channels. So if they're not going to support you and feature you, you can buy the feature. Yeah. On the media buying side, interstitials and just in-game ads are getting really popular, and of course, offer walls are very successful there as well. So in China, there's a lot of local and independent cell phone stores. This is also another form of distribution. So when you buy a phone from a local store, sometimes they would just fill your phone up with pre-installed games, sometimes to the point where you can't even install any new games. They just fill it up with games. And you pretty much have to just delete games that's already on your phone if you want to install anything new. So these are not pre-installed by the manufacturer or the carrier, but by the local store. So they're all part of some kind of marketing program where they would get some form of payment for just installing all these games. So it really it gets pretty wild there. Yeah. And something a little more unique that they have on the more rural cities in China that have very limited Wi-Fi access and not much media exposure, where they have like a lot of factory workers. So what they have is they have something called physical app stores. And essentially what they are trucks that drive around with loudspeakers selling apps that call themselves app stores. Yeah, so it's in order to target some of the more countryside areas, you just really need to go really deeper in. Oh. So to sum it all up, it's pretty much there's over 200 Android channels, all where you need to make a custom deal with them, a custom rev share, and they all have specific needs. There's over 20 payment channels that you definitely need to integrate with. You need to make sure your game, people can pay for your game. There's the battle with piracy and working with the channels on getting your games removed. Not your games, the pirated versions of your games removed. And there's the challenge of localization and truly culturalizing your game into making it fit the Chinese market, as well as the hardware limitation of supporting lower end phones, which is a huge pain. And finally, there's always the challenge of marketing and promoting your game. Just whether it's through channel support, co-promotion, offline marketing. So you don't really need to be a big company to be able to, it looks like there's a lot of issues here, and you really don't need to be a big company to be able to fight these, to succeed in China. A lot of small companies have succeeded very, very well in China. But one thing that they have in common is they all have a really strong partner that they work with in China. And I know a lot of companies have tried. Rovio has created their own China office, trying to penetrate China for a while before they ended up partnering with us to launch Angry Birds back then. And you really just need the right partner that can help you navigate it and has a clear and good solution for each of these problems that I mentioned today. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Do we have any questions? Yeah.
Hey, Jason. So you mentioned Android stores and rural app trucks, I guess, and the install at retail shops. How about pre-installing at the origin of OEMs like ZTE, Huawei, Oppo, as an option?
So the carriers, they kind of are their own channel as well too. So the carriers would be involved in pre-installs as well too. On the OEMs, I'm not too familiar, actually, to be honest, about whether the actual manufacturers get involved with pre-installs. I don't think it's that common. I think I think it's more on the carrier side as well as the local store side, I believe.
Thanks. Any other questions? I actually have one question for you. A lot of developers, when I talk to them and they're thinking about China, they always think about going through a publisher, right? We have some examples of successful apps that haven't gone through a publisher. But I mean, publisher, no publisher, or what are the characteristics of a Western game to be successful in China without a publisher?
So without a publisher, it's very, very difficult to, I guess the only case study that I could think of where they just kind of released it in China and it did well was Clash of Clans. Of course, that's the lightning in the bottle, that's the exception. That's the route everybody wants to go with, but it's very difficult to beat Clash of Clans. For most other developers, they've had to do a lot of localization. They've had to change a lot of the art. We've gotten a lot of reskin projects on the art studio side directly from developers that were trying to get into China. And reskinning your game, as we all know, is very costly and a very difficult project. So that's where we were able to help out. But and just understanding each of these areas, such as like payments, and being able to just have a good solution for them is really the key challenge. So I feel like for a developer, it's extremely difficult, especially if they don't have much. A lot of developers are smaller, like 10-person teams that are focusing on just getting the game stable or getting the game out or even working on their next game. They really don't have a lot of leverage to be able to cut a build just for China that's specific for China. It's a lot of work, a lot of resource management and version control there. So it's difficult, but some developers have been able to do it. But as far as I know, there have not been many success stories without a strong partner.
Cool, thank you. Any other questions?
Right. Thank you very much for the gross sales breakdown. And you mentioned that there's only 44% left on Android, right? What if we throw in the publisher cut, right? What's left for the Western company?
So if you work with a publisher, sometimes the publishing deals, it would depend whether it's a 70-30 split. That would be an additional 70% net on top of that. So a lot of developers, they go into China not understanding kind of where all the payment deductions are going to be. So when they realize that they're only going to get roughly around potentially like 20% of gross sales, they get extremely upset. But at the same time, it's the difficult part of China is either you kind of follow along or you just don't get any of the market share in China. It's really that's kind of how it is. And it's a little unfortunate, but just there's so many layers that you just need to penetrate through.
So 70% of the 44% goes to the publisher?
70% of the 44, yes. But it would all depend on what kind of deal you cut with the publisher. Some publishers, you can negotiate higher minimum guarantees or license fees and be able to bring that down, or vice versa, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cool. We have room for one more question, and I think there was one over there.
Yeah, it was actually kind of following up on part of the question you asked that maybe I zoned out, but I didn't feel like I got a clear answer on, which was what types of games are most successful in China?
So right now, the most successful games revenue-wise are trading card games and RPGs. And then there are some full-fledged 3D MMORPGs, something that you'll find on like a PC game that have been successfully ported over to mobile that do that do really well too. And those actually have the highest ARPU and monetization as well too. So I guess there's two main tactics. You can either go the high ARPU route and with a lower volume, or you can always go the high volume route, such as like tower defense or casual games. Like there are match 3 games that do extremely well, just because there's 1 billion people in China, and although the amount of money you make per user is very small, but it definitely adds up. So there's very different routes, but the majority of those games are RPGs, trading card games, kind of a little bit of what we're starting to see here, a little more prevalent here.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jason.
Thank you.